Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Oakland-Wide community meeting for June. My name is Wanda Wilson. I'm Executive Director with Oakland Planning and Development. We're going to go ahead and get started tonight. We have two items on the agenda. We have a few updates for you and then two presentations. One about a proposed two-home development on the 3700 block of Dawson Street, 3738 Dawson, and some information about water line replacements happening in the neighborhood. So some updates for you. Please consider making a donation to OPDC today. It's our day of giving right before our fiscal year ends this month. And your donation would go to support homeownership in Oakland through the Oakland Community Land Trust. We have our next group of series of our Bridges to Career Opportunities program is going to start soon. So if you're interested or if you know somebody who could benefit from this program, please check it out on our website. And we have funds available through the Community Land Trust Aging in Place program for seniors who need to do home repairs. We can still get these transactions completed in time to do construction while it's still construction season before the snow flies this year. So please consider getting in touch if that's something that would be useful for you. And Clutter for a Cause was successful yesterday. And the next event is July 26th. So that's a place where you can donate gently used items. And it's also an initiative just to make sure that Oakland streets are kept clean of all move out debris during the summer now. So hopefully you've been noticing that there isn't as much debris on the streets, which we're glad to report through this initiative, which is a partnership with OPDC and University of Pittsburgh. Now we'll move on to our first presentation. So maybe we want to make sure we have the address of the property correct. So I'll introduce our speaker, Jeremiah Brooks from Stantec. And Jeremiah, if you can verify, I don't know if we have the address right, if it's 3738 Dawson or 3837. So if you can clarify that, introduce yourself. So as a speaker, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and turn your video on so we can see you while you're speaking. Everyone else can stay muted and offer your input and comments and questions through the chat. And after Jeremiah goes through his slides, we'll be able to take questions and have a discussion about the proposal at that time. And I'll be monitoring the chat for that.
All right, thank you, Wanda.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have it as 37. I believe it's 3730 Dawson, okay. And the parcel is 28H105. So the current parcel is currently 50 feet wide, and it's zoned for R1H, would be single family, high density. So we're currently looking at two options. One is where we maintain the lot, and a second option is where we subdivide the lot. So this first option would be a subdivision in order to maintain a single family residence, two standalone houses that would meet the existing zoning setbacks or exceed them. So we're looking at the hatched area in the lower right-hand corner of the site plan indicates the buildable area in white. So we're maintaining a 5-foot setback of the side yard property lines, and we're maintaining a 50 or 15-foot setback from the main street. We are required to have off-street parking. So this option does address that by having a single curb cut and off-street parking in front of the house, which does increase the setback to about 25 feet, just to give enough room for the, make sure that vehicles can get off the roads and maintain a clear sidewalk. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath option, clearly very early in concept, because we wanted to make sure that we were progressing in a direction that was acceptable with the community and had reviewed it and buy-in. The second option would be to maintain the single lot. And if we could advance to that, this would be to maintain a single lot and ask for a variance to do a duplex. This would allow us to get a little bit more right of way for a drive lane to be able to put parking in the rear. So in this diagram here, we're maintaining the 5-foot setback to the side yard, and then we're maintaining a much larger 15-foot side setback to the additional side yard to be able to provide a driveway to the rear of the property to keep parking at a minimum in front of the building. We would respect the front yard setback of 15 feet, and this would also reduce 1 curb cut for the property. So again, the option that we looked at first would be what zoning is requiring us as far as the setbacks. We're under the height restrictions, and we would be providing parking with 1 curb cut per house, as this is the only street that would allow vehicle traffic to enter the property. The second option, we would be asking for a variance or support of a variance to do a duplex, and then be able to provide the parking in the rear of the building with 1 curb cut.
So just to make sure everybody is understanding that this isn't actually a development, an official development activities meeting that's required by the city. That this is, the owner is coming toward the community just to see, to get people's viewpoints and thoughts on these 2 options so that they could determine what they want to do and then be able to go through the process. So I just kind of wanted to clarify that. Jeremiah, I'm sure you said that, but just to be clear.
Yeah.
So it really is an opportunity for you to just get input from people today about the different sort of pros and cons of each, right?
Right, and exactly. And again, we're early in just massing stages right now. So any feedback is good feedback that we'll be able to address and consider.
And in both instances, like it doesn't change it's a proposal for 2 housing units in both cases.
Correct.
So they are kind of the same that way.
Yeah, the duplex would again be a variance asked because it's currently zoned a single family. So the duplex would be the variance there, but again, it would be 2 houses. And we felt that doing the duplex would be a little bit better to fit with the intent of the requirements. Is how we interpret, to make sure that we can get some off-street parking, reduce the amount of curb cuts, and kind of fit with within the rest of the character of the neighborhood.
So we have one comment in the chat so far that actually in your first option, where you had, maybe Kathy, if we could move to that slide, in this option where you show front yard parking, you would actually need to get special approval for that as well.
Okay.
So
is that an administrator exception?
Right. So I think it's potentially they're kind of different kinds of variances. But yeah, there's an approval process to go through in order to be able to have the parking spaces like that to be approved the way you show them there, essentially in the front setback.
Right.
So it's like as of right in terms of the like one housing unit on 1 lot, but the front yard parking would be an approval.
Right. And if I did see the question that R1AH is correct for the zoning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I know that someone I talked to earlier, but I don't think is able to attend the meeting, asked me whether you could speak to the stability of the hillside in the back. And I think especially on sort of your other option, the next slide, showing the parking being in the back, and there's maybe potentially sort of an unstable hillside toward the rear of the property. Could you speak to your viability of that as a location for parking? Kathy, maybe we could go to that slide for this question.
Yeah, like I said, very early in schematics, this was kind of a test fit to see what we could use. We do know that it drops off. There may be some retaining wall work that would be needed. We're trying to avoid that. But yeah, of course, I doubt that we would make any sort of capital improvement to build anything without stabilizing the hillside first, if we put the building at risk or put anything below the building at risk.
This is Andrea Kosis. I've got some more questions, if I may.
Sure.
So you're saying a variance would be required to do a duplex in an R1A district. Can you tell me why you'd require a variance to do a duplex?
Because from the way that zoning reads now, a duplex is not a single family home because it has a shared wall.
It's attached. R1A is attached. So
I thought R1A was detached. I'm sorry.
A is for attached. So unless there's minimum lot size issues, I think that would be,
okay,
would not require variance, A. B, minimizing, actually, so if you do a townhome unit, you are not required to provide off-street parking anymore.
Okay.
And then if the developer was intending on doing that anyway, since he also, I believe he also owns the adjacent surface parking lot, is that correct?
Yes.
Could he just provide parking spaces in that parking lot? Or provide access to parking spaces behind the townhomes to minimize curb cuts on that street?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of pedestrians in the area, and the more curb cuts, the more dangerous it is for people who are walking or biking.
Yes, I believe those are viable options.
That would for sure be preferable.
Okay. And if the parking, because it would be within 100 feet, that would just be administrator exception to go through?
No, it's not required for townhome uses.
Okay, would this
It would just be like, oh, we're just providing some. It was recently citywide parking requirements for townhomes became 0.
Okay, and just to clarify, a duplex does count as a townhome?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, again, you'll want to check what the lot size is.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Andrea. We have a couple of questions about the plans for these homes. Were they to be built, and would there be some assurance that the community could have that they would not be occupied by more than 3 unrelated persons per unit?
I mean, the intent is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And I know that, that is a zoning requirement that I would have to ask the owner on what the assurances would be as far as like the lease that he would set up or how he would plan to regulate that. And not to put Theo on the spot, I do know that he's in attendance if he would like to chime in, or I can regroup with him and respond with a more certain answer later.
Yeah, so there's always a couple of ways of looking at things, right? So I think the, parking in the adjacent lot is certainly a good idea to reduce curb cuts on the street for pedestrian safety. But often we hear comments from members of the community that it just puts more pressure on street parking potentially, which is very limited in Oakland. So we're seeing that here, not surprisingly. in the chat that we see now. Making the parking available to the people who live in those new construction homes would be also a benefit to the community to reduce the impact potentially on the, the street parking and how there's just more cars parking on the street than there are really spaces.
Right, and part of the plan moving forward was
also, what we're seeing here. There's a couple of different, there's the pedestrian safety and the not parking in front of the buildings, and actually that there isn't a requirement for parking in this particular case, but then concerns that community members would have about just the additional parking that would occur on the street.
Right, and as far as both of our plans and even hearing the comment of it not being required, I think the intent was always to have off-street parking, whether it was these options. I know we were going to see how this meeting had turned out. The conversation with the owner had brought that up as well. I can provide parking in the adjacent lot. So I think we would make sure there was a designated space per unit, regardless of the requirement.
So what about the idea of if there was a parking space made available in the lot next door that would be not an extra charge, and that would be somehow designated for people in the homes that were being built?
Yes, the intent that even if we don't provide parking within the parcel, that it would be one space per unit would be provided in the adjacent parking lot. So no additional curb cuts, no parking on the parcel that we're discussing now, but there would be reserved parking on the adjacent lot for the new construction.
And would there be a charge for that parking, or would it be no charge to the people who are using it?
I can't speak to that. That would depend on, how the owner's performer develops through the cost of construction and how he wants to manage.
Then we have a question about, saying one parking space per housing unit. And, I can answer that that's what the zoning requirement, always has been. Although now we're hearing from, Andrea, from who's a planner at City Planning, that actually, if they're townhouse units, is not a requirement, but there's no requirement according to zoning that you would provide 3 parking spaces per housing unit. That's not a requirement in the zoning code. So then we have another question about residential permit parking permits. So would the occupants of these homes be able to get permits if parking is available in the lot? Do you want to answer that, Jeremiah?
I don't know the answer as to how that lot is run. I'm sure there would be some form of preference for the tenants, but I would let the owner confirm that before agreeing to it.
For us at OPDC, and what we know from years of doing this work, single family homes are available to get residential permit parking permits, and there is a maximum of 3 per housing unit. And then there's a couple comments of ways to incentivize people to not bring a car to the Oakland neighborhood, and rethinking having a personal vehicle, related to the cost of parking. So this idea of, if you charge separately for the parking, it encourages people to park on the street. And, you know, are there other things to do to encourage people to not have a personal vehicle when they live in such a car-free, friendly location? And let me just sort out everything here. Yeah, there's a comment about other developments have not allowed tenants to apply for parking permits. And I would respond to that in those cases where that has occurred, that has been large multifamily developments that were outside of the residential permit areas, or that were either just inside and not originally something that was you know, that was a prior use as residential. So this is a vacant parcel, but it's not a large multifamily development. So, so it's sort of a slightly different case than what we've seen before. And yeah, just larger apartment buildings are just generally not eligible for the residential permit parking, but single family homes are eligible. Yeah, and Jeremiah, anybody with you as part of your team who would like to speak, you can do that. So if the owner would like to do that, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name's Theo. I just wanted to chime in about the parking. So I have no plans on charging people who would be living on the premises for my parking lot adjacent. Even though that during the pandemic, the numbers were really low with leases and students on the lot to the right, they would be there. Even if the lot was, you know, filled, they would be the first people to be guaranteed a spot on the lot, on my lot to the right. And also the other question I wanted to answer was there would be on all the rental properties my father had, there's no more than 3 people that are unrelated on a lease. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Do you feel like you've gotten the kind of feedback that you were, it always comes down to parking, right? But
yeah, you know,
I don't think I heard a lot of people saying that they really wanted to see a lot of curb cuts on this. You know, we heard a lot of folks having comments about parking generally, but I don't necessarily think, so anybody correct me in the chat if this is a wrong characterization, but I don't know that I heard anybody say, oh, I would prefer multiple curb cuts across the street. So I think that we're pretty clear on that one.
I mean, given that it's just one house away from the continuous curb cut where all the postal workers park, it would be nice to have as much intact sidewalk as possible on that street.
Right. So I think that some of the feedback might be slightly, you know, kind of all over the place. It's a complicated issue, but I think on that one, people are pretty clear.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So we'll definitely proceed in that direction. Yeah, I guess that was our, you know, we just wanted to make sure that we touched base with the community before we got too far ahead of ourselves, to make sure that there was nothing that we were proposing was out of line with what was expected or you know, what was wanted, and just again checking in to make sure that we were on base and before we proceed much farther. So we appreciate all the comments tonight.
Okay, we have 2 other ones. You know, would you incorporate trees into your design or into the development? And could you have people access parking on the back of these homes through the parking lot that's next to it, so then you wouldn't have a curb cut at all?
Yeah, we could go through that parking lot, but I think that the proposed issue would be now if we just do a single duplex on the lot and move up close to the setback as required, we would then provide the parking spaces within that additional lot rather than drive through the lot onto the space. We could do that. We would potentially lose the same amount of spaces in the lot as you would gain in the rear of the building because of drive lanes, and then again to address the comment of the soil stabilization and everything of that nature. The farther we get back there, the more issues it is. So if we can stay to the front of the property and use the existing parking, I think that would be best. But we could certainly entertain that idea with a revised site plan if that was really an option that was wanted.
And can you speak a little bit to your time frame? And I guess, we could update information on the website if you let us know what you.
Yeah, I would have to review
what
with.
Time frame would be.
I would review with Theo as far as what his time frame is. Right now, I don't know that we have an immediate time frame, but within a year at least, or within a year, we would go through the process to be ready for next year. So.
Okay, and it may, depending on what you decide to do, it may or may not end up on the zoning board agenda.
Correct.
We already had a question earlier about the stability of the hillside at the back of the lot, but there's a question about any studies that you've done.
We have not at this point. We would want to determine the building footprint before we would make any recommendations for soil samples, borings, any further geotechnical testing.
Thanks for presenting and coming to the community to get input prior to, finalizing your plans.
Yeah.
We definitely appreciate, appreciate that coming to the community, ahead of time to get input. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to our next item on the agenda is PWSA is here to give us information about line replacements in the neighborhood, and we have Maura McLaughlin.
Hi everyone, my name is Maura McLaughlin. I'm the Construction Communications Project Manager with the PWSA, and I just have a few slides tonight to give some information on upcoming water main replacements around Central Oakland. This is obviously an infrastructure upgrade. It's going to improve water quality, reliability for people living on those streets. And the contractor that has been awarded this work is Foligno Construction. So you'll be seeing Foligno trucks out there, and that'll be our water main crews. Why are we doing this? The water mains were selected for replacement because they're older, they may be smaller diameter, which means they don't carry the volume of water along the street that we'd like to see, or they've shown a high number of breaks that we've had to come out and do emergency repairs on in the last few years, which puts it high priority for us to replace. In addition to the water main being replaced on the street, we're going to replace any lead service lines attached to that main, which will provide an upgrade to the aging infrastructure and improve the water quality for those customers with lead service lines. And in addition to the work that we're going to do, we're obviously going to be restoring the street where we impact it and any of the sidewalks we impact as well. So to kick off, these are the impacted streets, and I do have a map that we're going to be able to see on the next couple slides. So I'll just stay on this slide for a minute, let it soak in. Obviously, this is spread out throughout the neighborhood. These aren't really on top of each other, and you'll see on the map. And they will be happening in phases. So not every street is going to be impacted at once, maybe 1 to 2 sections at a time. I think we can move to the next slide, please. Our project timeframe, we plan to start this work in mid-July. This work is actually part of a larger project. We're calling the 2021 small diameter water main replacement. We did this in 2020 as well. We did 14 miles of water mains in 2020, and we're going to be doing about 6 miles around the city in 2021. And this is going to be one of the first sites in that contract. It's being funded through PennVest, which is a state run investment grant and loan program. So it's going to be done through a loan through the state, and we're closing on that loan to start the project now. So once we do that, we're going to be able to start. We anticipate that's going to be mid-July. And we anticipate this work is going to take until about late winter 2021, early winter 2022. Next slide, please. And this will give you a little better idea. I just zoomed in a little more for you all to see where these water mains are located. Hit the next slide, please. So general process steps for any water main replacement we start with an inspection of service line material. So the crews are going to go from property to property and actually take off the cap that covers the shutoff valve. It's usually located in the sidewalk. And they're going to verify the service line material connected to the old water main. And this will help us identify those lead service lines I mentioned, so we know exactly where those are and where we need to coordinate with customers in the case of a private lead service line. So we'll do that at every property before we get started. The next step would be to actually install the new water main. So crews will work their way down the street, laying the new pipe in, and the old water main will remain in service during that time. After the new water main is installed, tested for any pressure deficiencies and sanitized on the inside, we start to install the new service lines, which are the connections between the new water main and the individual properties on the street. And this is the point in time where we coordinate with properties with any lead service lines to replace them at no cost to the customer. And then the final step of our work is restoring the sidewalks and any of the asphalt in the street that was impacted by the work to the state they were before construction. And we just like to remind people that there may be some delay between the work that's done and the restoration. We often try to get a chunk of work done and then move in with the crew that does all the restoration at one time. It's a more efficient way of doing the construction. So we usually backfill any sidewalks with aggregate stone, and we do a temporary restoration of the street, which is done, it's a little bit bumpy. It's done to be smooth and drivable, but obviously we do a very smooth, professional final product at the very end. And I see a question, I can address this real quickly. If it was cobblestone before, like on Chesterfield, it will be cobblestone after. We will restore it to the cobblestone it was before. The daily impacts of the work, our typical work schedule will be Monday through Friday, no weekend work, and it'll be from 7 a.m. until about 6 p.m. That is the permit that we'll receive from the city. And the general traffic impacts, impacted streets will be closed during working hours and reopened at the end of the day. If there's any open trenches, we will cover them with a steel plate for driving and safety, and we'll remove that plate when we start work the next morning. Detour signs will be posted where needed to move traffic around impacted streets, and no parking signs will be posted per city requirements 48 hours in advance on the impacted streets. So people have time to move their cars and avoid any potential towing. And I just want to get into a little bit of lead service line replacement, because this is really where our work touches individual customers in the case that a lead line is found. So this is a schematic for a typical service line for a residential property. There is a joint ownership of service lines in our service area. So you see the water main in the street there, the service line comes in, you see that cap I was talking about in the sidewalk. That portion between the cap, the shutoff valve, and the water main is PWSA owned. And then from that point into the home is the ownership of the property owner. And the reason that we have to coordinate with customers is that we need the permission from the customer to go into the home and complete the needed work to replace any private lead service lines. And each side of the service line can be different materials. Maybe a service line broke many years ago and half of it was replaced and the other half was not. So sometimes we see one side being lead, the other side being copper. Sometimes they're both lead. The combinations can vary. And this is a newer policy. It's a protocol of the Public Utility Commission that we're regulated by that went into effect this spring that I want to make sure everybody knows about. As I mentioned, when we replace a portion of the service line between the water main and the curb, we offer to replace that private side if we find it is also made of lead. So we remove any trace of lead from the service line at one time. And as I mentioned, because this work happens on private property, we need property owners to sign an agreement to allow that work to happen. If a property owner does not return the agreement or declines the replacement, does respond but says, no, I don't want this to happen, and it's confirmed there is a private lead service line, PWSA is required per the regulation to terminate water service until that customer replaces the private side on their own dime and proves to us that that work has occurred. So as I mentioned, this when done by PWSA, this is no cost to the customer. We just need that permission. So it's very important to us that we get all of our agreements back and we don't have to terminate water service. We don't want to do that, which is why we want to get those agreements back to us. And just the restoration policy, we get a lot of questions about work happening on private property and what PWSA was responsible for versus what the customer would be responsible for. Our contractors are incentivized to use the least disruptive methods possible to do this work. And a homeowner or their representative that's appointed by the homeowner must be present during that replacement. PWSA will backfill a trench in the case that we have to dig a trench to replace a private service line, but we will not restore things like stairs, retaining walls, decorative landscaping that could be disturbed as part of the work. However, I always bold this last bit because I think it's the most important bit on the slide. Over 98% of our replacements are done with a less disruptive trenchless method. We actually dig a hole in the street. We connect a cable to the old service line from inside the home in the basement. We actually pull out the old service line and pull the new one in behind it, so there is no trench involved in the work. It's a very successful method. And with that, I just want to take questions. If there's anything in the chat, I'll take a look.
Yeah, you can go ahead. You did a good job of looking at the chat before, so there are a couple there you can answer.
Sure. In terms of adjacent blocks being affected, there are instances in which we have to connect the new water main to the existing system. So where a water main intersects, much like a street would intersect, water mains intersect at intersections. There are some instances where we need to shut down an intersection to make that connection, but that's usually a 1 to 2 day process. And that's as much as an adjacent street would be impacted by the work. And I can look into coordination with work on Louisa and Chesterfield. I'm not aware at this time, but that doesn't mean that there's not coordination happening. So I'll make a note to myself. And Elizabeth, I'll get back to you on that.
And then you just had one other one about, the 7 a.m. and it could involve jackhammering.
Yes, so normally our crews are arriving on site at 7 a.m. and just setting up their work. They try to keep any noise to a minimum early in the morning, and I will certainly remind them that as they set up to just be mindful of the neighborhood. But usually it's just prepping the site, removing any steel plates and things like that to actually prepare for the work to start. In St. James and Law Street, are you referring to water main replacement work? If so, I would have to check with our designers. At this time, those streets are not slated for this year, but that doesn't mean that maybe it's not in the plans for the coming years, but I can certainly check on that as well.
This wouldn't be for water line replacement. This is for more ongoing issues particularly on Lawn Street. This has been going for years now with sinkholes and disruption to the lanes. We've had it scoped a couple, you guys have come and scoped it a couple of times. And there is a problem with some of the sewer lines that are crumbling. It's at the older end, and it's also on the side of the hill going down towards the parkway. So as they say, water flows downhill. And on St. James Way, that is a private, it's not a private way, it's a city street that goes between Semple and McKee Place. And yes, you know what I'm talking about.
Sorry, it's coming back to me. Yes, I recall this. I can see if there's been any movement since we last spoke about this. I think it was last summer or maybe before. I can check for you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? And I'm just going to now put some information in the chat. Everybody can copy and paste this out. And for people on the phone, again, my name is Maura McLaughlin. I'm the Construction Communications Project Manager at PWSA. I'm going to put my phone number and my email in there. My phone number is 412-689-4137. So if there's any questions, please get a hold of me. My email is mmclaughlin, that's mmclaughlin at pgh20.com, pgh2.com. I'm also going to put the link to our project page where I'll be providing project updates. And again, usually the first couple of weeks of a project I always find are where we work out any issues we might have on site, and then it's usually pretty smooth sailing from there. So please, if you see anything or you have any issues, give me a call or shoot me an email. And in terms of parking, we are going to be providing 48-hour notice for parking, so people have a chance to prepare themselves for parking in the morning. But other than ample notification, no, we have no additional parking accommodation as part of this work. Dawson, this might be, oh yeah, in reference to the.
Yeah, so that, yeah, if people have, so this is our ending slide here, concluding slide. There's a feedback form on the website. You know, if you'd like to provide some additional information about the first project that was presented, you can do it there. You could use that link to get to it. You can also just go to the project page itself. We won't have an Oakland-Wide meeting. This meeting that we're having, this is the June meeting. We won't have one in July. Be back with this meeting Tuesday, August 31st at 6, and that'll be on Zoom and Facebook Live. And we will have our Let's Talk meeting. That's more of a resident focused discussion that will also include Oakwatch as a component of that meeting, Wednesday, July 21st at 6, and that's on Zoom. So mark those dates on your calendar, and you know, make sure you're signed up for our e-newsletter and follow us on social media. I think that's it. Thank you, Maura, for your presentation. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight and for all of your active participation. We definitely appreciate all the comments and engaging in the discussion about both of these items. So we'll conclude. Notes from the meeting tonight will be available on our website for both project pages, and the recording will also be available on the website as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this evening.